Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to talk about Zen koans. I'm going to tell you three stories and we are going to see what they can teach us about ourselves. Okay, before we get into it, I want to give a disclaimer that I'm not a Zen student, not associated with any Zen schools or any particular teacher, etc. I'm a lay reader of Zen. So if you are a Zen student and if you find discrepancies in whatever I say, I apologize. Now, what is a koan? A koan, as it is generally understood, is a public record, a thing of public interest. That's the general meaning of the word koan. But what koans essentially are these riddles, these stories, these ideas, which, when looked at in the form of a narration or form of a story, poses a puzzle, poses a question to the mind which makes you suspend the intellect. They are not meant to directly educate, elucidate any point, but generally just create this space in thinking, this gap in your thinking. And the hope is that the vacuum, the space, the gap which is created once you understand or listen to a koan is hopefully filled by something like intuition. Okay, so that's the general understanding of the word koan. I am not a Zen interpreter, so my interpretations of these koans are based on simply how interesting I find them to be. In general, though, in Zen studies, as a Zen student, you are not supposed to be given interpretations of koans. Okay, you are not supposed to adopt anyone else's interpretation but come up with your own interpretations. But this video is just kind of a guideline and my own personal interpretations of some of these koans. So when you listen to them, perhaps pause the video after each story has been told and think about what it makes you feel. Think about what thoughts arise, and then I'll listen to what I'm presenting. So the first koan is about the Holy One who walks with the assembly. That's what it's called. The Holy One who walks with the assembly. So the story goes like this. There is an old Zen monk who is an abbot of not just one temple but plenty of many temples. And he is a Zen leader and also a Zen teacher. And he is walking with his assembly of students, of other Zen teachers, etc. etc. And the goal is for them to expand their set of schools, their set of Zen teachings. And so they are going to evaluate where should they start the new Zen temple. Okay, so that's the topic of discussion among them, and they are just walking down a path. And as they are walking down a path, one of the Zen teachers comes up to the Holy One. He's called as the Holy One. He has no name in this particular story. And they ask him, "O Holy One, where should we erect the next Zen temple?" And takes up his thinking and he takes a pause and he points at the ground. Okay, he just points a finger at the ground. And on the ground there is a patch of grass which is barren. There's grass growing all around, but there's a circle in between where there's no grass. And he points at the barren patch of grass and says, "That's where we should erect a Zen temple." And as he says so, there is a moment of silence, and then one Zen student steps forward. He plucks a patch of grass from one spot where there is plenty of grass, and he plants that patch of grass, that bunch of grass, in the barren patch. And the chosen one, the Holy One, says, "There, the Zen temple has been erected." And they walk on. So that's the first story. What does that mean? See, pause the video, think about it, and then hit play again. There are multiple interpretations of this koan, but as you can tell, there is no logical interpretation that comes to mind. One of the first interpretation that comes to me is that not everything requires planning. Some decisions have to be taken intuitively. And so as I'm walking down and I see a problem, which is there is a barren patch of grass where grass should be growing, but for whatever reason it is not growing there. I intuitively solve the problem. I come to the problem, I look at it, and I say, what is the spontaneous action that wants to come out of me that wants to solve a problem? So, when the student who is present in that moment, he understands that this barren patch of grass, what does it need? It needs more grass. And so he plants grass over there, and that action is in its spontaneity complete. See, that's all that was required in that moment, which points to the fact that this is not such a big issue. See, our life's problems are not so big. When the time comes, your intuition will tell you what needs to be done. And so his way of teaching his followers is to say that I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know where the correct location is. For all I could care, that is the correct location. And the student steps forward and says, yes, that's how we should solve the problem. It is not meant to be taken literally. That is not the literal location. It's just the side of the walkway or the side of the trail. But a general interpretation is an idea will present itself. And when an idea presents itself, that's how you solve that particular problem. Second interpretation of this koan is do what is necessary. Do what is necessary. Don't create too many elaborate plans. Don't complicate matters more than they need to be complicated. Do what is necessary in the moment, spontaneously. See, that's the second interpretation. So, if you have big plans coming up, sometimes the solution is quite simple. Do what is simple, do what is essential, do it quickly. See. Third interpretation could be that let's not make erecting a Zen temple or solving a particular problem another problem on top of the 100 different problems we already have in our lives. A Zen temple, which can be a parable, a metaphor for heaven in this context, can be any way you like. You don't have to go looking for God. You don't have to go looking for the Buddha. You don't have to go looking for enlightenment. You don't have to go looking for all these concepts in all these different teachers or studies or what have you, in different books. You can have a Zen temple within you, wherever you want it, right here, right now. See, through correct action, the door of the Zen temple, which is within you, will open. That's the other interpretation. These are my interpretations, okay? You make up your own interpretations as you listen to these stories. Now on to the second koan. This is a story between two Zen teachers. One is Unsho and the other's name is Tenzin. So Unsho and Tenzin are both good Zen teachers of their time, but they are different in the sense that Unsho is a very disciplined monk. He wears proper robes, he's always clean, well shaven, all of that. Very disciplined, follows all the mannerisms, the manners of what proper Zen monk should be doing. He carries his scriptures with him, doesn't do anything that a Zen monk is not supposed to be doing, watches his tongue, watches his tone. A very straight cut kind of a person. Tenzin is the opposite. Tenzin has read his scriptures, but he doesn't keep clean. He doesn't clean his house. He doesn't particularly obey all the rules that Zen monks are supposed to obey. He engages in drinking, in eating whatever he wants to eat. He doesn't mind being with women, etc., etc., etc. So he is that kind of a teacher. And they both have their own separate streams of thoughts. And so Tenzin one day invites Unsho to his house. Says, come over and let's have dinner. So Unsho is hesitant, but he says, okay, I will come because you have invited me and so on. And so he goes. And once he sits down for dinner, Tenzin says, let's have some wine. And Unsho says, wine? What do you mean wine? He says, let's have some alcohol. Let's have some wine. You're here, you are my guest, and I'm offering you wine. And Unsho takes offense, says, I'm a Zen monk. I am not supposed to be having wine. What do you mean you're offering me wine? This is not in our tradition. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. This is not what we are supposed to be doing. You shouldn't be having wine either. And you should, least of all, offer it to me. And so Tenzin says, you are not going to accept my wine? What kind of a human being are you? You are not even a human being. And he throws the glass of wine. Tenzin gets angry or demonstrates anger. Unsho gets even more angry. He says, what do you mean I'm not a human being? Who do you think I am if I'm not a human being? And Tenzin looks at him and says, you are a Buddha. Okay, and that's the story. What does that mean? What does that mean? Take a moment to think about it. So, there are again multiple interpretations possible. One of the interpretations is Tenzin is educating Unsho or demonstrating to him that being a Zen monk goes far beyond scriptures, goes far beyond what the books say, goes far beyond conceptual thinking, step-by-step conceptual thinking. It requires you to look far beyond those things because they become divisions in their own form. You see me and you look at me and you say, my clothes are like rags, my house is unkempt, I am drinking alcohol, and you are saying, where are your scriptures? You are judging me based on my outward appearance, but you fail to see my essential nature, my Buddha nature. But I can still see that within you. See? So I'm willing to look at you beyond the scriptures, beyond what is obvious. See? So what is the koan tries to teach us is don't judge people based on their outward appearance. That's a superficial understanding. But it is saying, look at the essential nature of people. Look closer. Don't just look at whether their behavior matches with yours. Don't try to put them in a certain framework and see if they fit that narrative. No two people are same. Even though you may be walking the path, I'm walking the path in my own way. See? Look beyond the scriptures. Look beyond what you are supposed to be doing. The second thing is, second interpretation is, the essential nature of a person cannot be hidden. The essential nature of who you are cannot be hidden by the fact that you're a Zen monk. See? And the essential nature of you and me is that we are awakened Buddhas in the context of Zen Buddhism, in the context of a koan. And so we are not here to put on robes, to absorb scripture, and to layer our brain with more concepts. We are here to simplify things. We are here to figure out what our true root nature is. See? And it is better to directly come to that root nature instead of going through all these routes. And even if you want to take those routes because they suit you, for example, if someone is a more habitual, more structured thinker, follow the scriptures, follow the structure if the structure makes you happy, but don't become a slave to that structure. See, keep things simple, keep things direct. That's the other interpretation. So that's the second koan. Now is the third one, which is a very famous one. This one is called the sound of one hand. The sound of one hand. There was a Zen temple whose abbot was called Mokurai. He was a very good teacher. And there was a child who was working in the Zen temple. His name was Toyo. Okay? So this is a story of Mokurai and Toyo. And Toyo was very interested in learning Zen Buddhism. Always very keen, dropping in on the Zen teachings, listening to what Mokurai is teaching all the Zen monks. And he would hide and he would look through the windows and he would steal some of the lessons. And Toyo's father was one of the Zen monks who was also a member of the same temple, same family. And he would say, "You are too young for all this. You shouldn't be dropping in on these lessons. When your time will come, you will understand. But right now, you shouldn't be dropping in." But Toyo wouldn't listen. So one day, he barged into Mukurai's room. Mukurai was just finishing up his dinner and he was sitting there. And he said to Mukurai, "I want to learn. I want to observe you. I've been observing you. Teach me, please." And Mukurai says, um, "What did you hear outside in the evening?" And in the evening, there was a big procession. There were some villagers had come there, and there was a demonstration by the monks or what have you. And the villagers were clapping as they saw it. So Toyo remembers. He says, "Oh, all the villagers were clapping in the evening. The most prominent sound I heard was the sound of clapping." And Mukurai says, "Fine, that was the sound of two hands." And Toyo says, "Yes, sound of clapping is the sound of two hands." And Mukurai says, "What is the sound of one hand?" And Toyo is confused. Says, I don't know. Says, "That's your koan. That's your puzzle. That's the question you need to answer. When you can answer that question to me, you will have learned something." So he says, "Go figure out what is the sound of one hand." And so Toyo says, "All right, I'll figure it out." And he's just a child, 12, 13 years old. And he goes away and he goes for a walk in the evening and he meditates in the woods and it begins to rain and he meditates to the sound of rain and he feels peaceful. So he's very excited the next morning and he comes to Mukurai and says, "Master Mukurai, I have figured it out. It is the sound of rain." And Master Mukurai says, "Rain, you say? That's very good. But that is not the sound of one hand. Go back. Think some more on it." And Toyo is very frustrated. He says, "Okay." And so he goes back to his house. And as he's sitting there in the evening, there are some women walking by his house. And one of the women has a beautiful voice and she's singing. And he's mesmerized by the voice. So he says, that must be it. Because it's not clapping, it's not rain, that must be it. And so he goes back to Mukurai and says, "Master Mukurai, I figured it out. It is a beautiful voice of a beautiful maiden, a voice of a woman, singing voice." And he says, "That's definitely not it. See, that's not the sound of one hand." So Toyo gets frustrated, goes back again, and then in the evening it rains again. And this time there is not just a sound of rain, but there is sound of thunder, of lightning. And every time the lightning strikes, he feels still within him. So he goes back again, and Master Mukurai again says, "No, that's not it." And so this continues for over 2 years. Every single day or every single week, Toyo would go back and say, "I've found it, found it, found it." Mukurai says, "No, no, no." Eventually, Toyo gives up, completely stops going back to Master Mukurai. He grows up and he becomes a traveler. He travels the world, trying to figure things out his own way. And one day, when he is meditating, he comes upon a state of mind in which he has no questions anymore. He finds complete silence and he forgets about everything, all the problems in his life. And as it happens so, a few days later, he's passing by his old school where he grew up, where he was cleaning, etc., etc., Master Mukurai school. And so he remembers, "Oh, maybe I should go and pay Master Mukurai a visit, see how he's doing." So he's just passing by, comes by, and Master Mukurai says, "Toyo, it's you. I haven't seen you for so many years. How have you been?" And they talk. And then he asked Toyo, "Hey, did you ever figure out the koan I gave you? The sound of one hand?" And Toyo says, "Oh, that one. Well, I thought about it for a long time, many years, but then I reached the sound of no sound. I found the soundless sound." And Master Mukurai says, "That's just it, my boy. That's just it. And that's the story. So what does this story tell us? This is quite a complex koan, but if you think about it, the education that is to be gained from understanding this koan is that often these questions are meant to confuse you, to befuddle you. And these questions, by what is meant by these questions, is the questions that life poses. Not just a koan, but the questions that life sometimes poses to you. Where should I go from here? What should I do if my marriage isn't working out? If someone in your family is sick or recently passed away, we feel lost. It's natural to feel lost. What to do after these things? See, there are certain questions for which there is no intellectual answer. The only answer, if there is one, is found when there is complete acceptance, when there is no thought anymore in the mind that creates this pursuit of some form of answer, some form of liberation. But when there is no liberation to be found, when there are no answers that come by, at some point there is a complete quietness that arrives in the mind, which says, I just don't know. And when you don't know, that's when you find the sound beyond all sounds. That's when you find quietness. And this quietness isn't forced. This quietness is spontaneous. This quietness isn't a building up of something else. This quietness has no build up whatsoever. It's quite possible to force yourself to be quiet, but the noise is building up. The desire is building up. And once you start talking or thinking again, then all the thoughts come forcefully, like an exploding volcano. And so this is not that kind of silence. This is a silence which is deep. This is a silence which leaves no trace. And so when Toyo found this silence, it is not that he found answers to his questions, it is that he reached a place where there are no questions at all. And so this is what these koans do. They make you ponder, they make you meditate, they make you question. So don't be satisfied with my explanations or interpretations. That's not good Zen. See, good Zen is sitting with your koan, meditating on it, and treating it just as you would a problem in life, or treating a problem in your life just as you would treat a koan, like a riddle that I will at some point solve. And until the point that I am able to solve it, I treat it just as that, a riddle, a question, something that is guiding me, something that is testing me, something that I enjoy exploring.